And oh, no, we're not. It says an error occurred on Facebook. This is really,
Mm.
oh, come on. Well, go to everywhere else. We'll just uncheck Facebook. Oh, maybe we're live everywhere else. That's funny. So StreamYard, for you, those of you that don't know, you can do multiple instead of having your phone, your laptop, your
Mm.
tablet. You can do multiple platforms in one area, which is what I really like because I don't have all that. So I have a kid. So if I have all that, something's getting snatched, taken, or broken. So I'm trying to limit my technology that I have. So apparently I think we were live on YouTube and Twitter, but not live on Facebook. Very intriguing. So I have one of the most amazing women I know, Kristen Downs. She is an executive coach and founder of The Notable Woman. So I'm very excited to talk to her today. She usually works with professionals more so along in their careers that are pivoting, because she talked about how she had done this so many times. And I love this coin she's termed. I don't know if she's coined or not, but I'm giving her full credit. So I don't care if you correct me because I'm a great resignation, because I feel like that's what's happening. I mean, it kind of was going down in my house at one point. Everybody was hitting in resignations and pivoting to something different. Especially me in December, I was like, I don't want to. Trauma work is heavy and it's getting heavier. I want
Mm.
to do lighter work, and I went into coaching. I am now more recently going into my own practice, but this is like something that's happening everywhere. So talk to us a little bit about the Great Resignation, because this term is like, I think you have coined perfectly that people are like almost fed up and they
Yeah.
want something different.
Well, I certainly appreciate that you think I coined it. I definitely did not. It was coined by, I believe his name is Anthony Kundal, who is a professor, and he studies labor and the workforce, and he predicted. Now, so also SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resource Management Professionals, they also predicted that there would be a very large amount of people turning over after there was a little bit of comfort post the pandemic's initial shocks to many industries. So they called it the turnover tsunami is what they called it, and he called it the Great Resignation, and his term is what took off, and I like that better. Other people have called it things like the Great Reshuffle and things like that. But I like resignation because it definitely gives a sense of, I'm over this, right?
Yeah. Like I'm
Definitely.
tired, which is the cry almost. Is weird. If people are tired, it's not
Yes.
a shuffle mix. It is literally, we're done here. We are done
Yes.
here.
And that people want, they want something different. That's
Mhm.
99.9% of what I hear from people is that either that they felt like their industry really took advantage of them
Mhm.
in the pandemic. Certainly, that's what I hear
Yep.
from people in higher ed and people in the K through 12 system, that they feel like nobody really cared if they lived or died, just that the
Right.
system kept working
Moving.
and
Yep.
operating. And certainly, the first group of people that we saw a big Great Resignation from was people in retail, hospitality, food service. Obviously, those industries were terribly hit by
Yeah.
the pandemic as far as layoffs, eliminations, and closures were concerned. But then also the number one profession in the United States to die in the pandemic was line cooks. So
Oh.
um, yeah, so certainly some of the numbers that we're seeing as far as the workforce are concerned are not just Great Resignation. They're also people who, I mean, if you look at excess deaths in the United States, there's well over 1 million excess deaths. So, and that of course could be COVID related, but also people who
Yeah.
couldn't get care for certain reasons because hospitals were full, things like that. So there's a lot of people who are missing from the workforce because they're not here anymore.
Right.
There's a lot of people missing from the workforce because they have long COVID and they've been,
Sick.
disabled to the point where they can't work. And then, of course, there's people leaving because of, what we're here more to talk about, which is just they're over it.
You know what? I didn't realize people. I hear the term long COVID. I didn't realize people were then becoming disabled and no longer able to work post COVID after they've gotten COVID. So some of these variants were really, really racking people's bodies. I didn't realize that. And I often say that we have these open spaces because people forget. I mean, on my caseload, I probably had 4 or 5 kids before I wrapped up at the agency I was at that lost their parents to COVID. And so we forget that if your loved ones, your friends are passing from COVID, most of the times they weren't retired, they had a job, and
Mhm.
now these jobs are open. Now add on to people who are struggling with long COVID, now disabled can't work. That's a whole nother demographic. And then people who got overworked from their
Mhm.
job. And I do because there's this great pivot going on. And so I want to talk about what does this look like for people? How do they take advantage of the fact it really is an employee market right now? And you could pretty much, if you're looking for a career change, you could pretty much dive in and get one.
Absolutely, and I wanna hit one point that you mentioned and then tie it back into the change. So, with the number of people and the stat on this, the last I heard was that, across the globe, that, of something like 1,000,000 children lost a caregiver in,
Wow.
the pandemic, and certainly the United States experienced that as well. So, when you see, of folks who lost, children who lost
Mhm.
a caregiver, someone else has to step in. So,
Right.
the last stat that I saw was something like the population of Pennsylvania has essentially left the workforce. So
Mm.
that's, like, obviously not all of Pennsylvania, but that is the
The
number of
equivalent
people.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So millions of people left the workforce. I certainly think some of them are for long COVID. I think some of them are because maybe there were two parents working, and either one they decided that they could get by on one, or they didn't have the same level of daycare or childcare, things like that,
Right.
and also because the other caregiver was not here anymore, and so somebody else had to step in. So a lot of folks that I work with are people who basically either they felt like their workplace was really toxic and abusive in the pandemic and they had to stay because there
Mm.
weren't jobs out there. And now that there are, they want to leave because they feel like their workplace really took advantage of them. There are people who sort of, I would say maybe like their whole industry as opposed to just an entity. So maybe one organization was not great to their employees, but then there are places where basically, like, the whole system is problematic, like, for what
Right.
you talked about, like, doing trauma therapy. I've talked to nurses and therapists, teachers, professors. All these people are seeing the long-term emotional effects that people are
Right.
having, and everything that they had to deal with before, which was pretty bad, is now really bad,
It's
really extreme.
compounding. It's at this point, it's very complex. It was. I mean, they told me at our agency they couldn't hire them fast enough, and they were hiring them fast, and we were quitting just because it was becoming overwhelming. So you couldn't even get to a place of stability, and the increase in somebody's just cutting up in school and struggling with behavioral issues to now I'm ready to take my own life was drastic. I mean, we went from a couple of cases to a couple of therapists having to deal with this to pretty much everybody's caseload was half of this with our kids. So it was getting pretty bad.
And it's terrible, and I hear the same thing from everyone that they went from, maybe they had a couple people who were having, issues with, some sort of drug dependency, and now it was out of control. And
Yep.
then, the next step, like, each step is too full so that, whatever level that would be more extreme that someone would go to, they don't have room for them. They don't have the number of workers to care for them. So then maybe they're
Yep.
pushing into the next level and the next level and the next level. And so then people say at hospitals, like I've worked with some nurses who have they're not trained to deal with people who are having withdrawal or
Right.
psychological issues or but they don't have any place to put them, so they get put on their floor, but they don't have the correct they don't have the correct personnel, they don't have the correct medicine
Training
or
resources,
restraints
nothing.
or yeah, exactly. So then creates a really unsafe environment for everyone.
Right.
And again, everybody's seeing some version of this. Obviously, this is much more extreme. But so when I bring up sort of the point of the parents issue is that a lot of folks that I have been talking to are basically a combination of either COVID has made them realize that they like their families also COVID's made some people realize they don't like their families, but those are not the people that hire me, right? But the folks realize they like their family. They'd like to see them more often,
Right, right.
so they think that I don't want to spend this time commuting. I don't want to work
Yeah,
80 hours a week. I like my kids. I like my partner. I kind of want to see them.
right.
So that's something that comes up. But then also the second thing that comes up is that for a lot of people, life is harder because they've lost a lot of their support system as far as people that could take care of their children for
Yeah,
them,
yeah, yeah.
childcare options, things like that. And so they actually need more flexibility at work so that they can make their lives work, you know? So those are all things that come up when I work with people. And then, of course, there's also just the fact that because of the environment that we're in, I really do think that your ability to get higher pay is just it's so much easier right now to up level position title and get, significantly more pay than you have now. It's just a lot more options. Or, for some people, they don't really want more pay or necessarily a title jump, but they do want to work remotely. And they
Mhm.
want that confirmed position remotely rather than the constant back and forth of, are we
Yeah.
going back? Are we not going back?
3 days in the office is that's what I'm getting now is like a lot of corporations like, well, we want a hybrid. We're gonna leave you home, but we're gonna also gonna bring you in. And people are like, no. Especially in here, like I can imagine, I don't know how bad Buffalo's traffic is. I feel like New York as a whole, their traffic may be bad, but you guys also have subways. We don't have a very efficient subway system. So when you're talking travel, commute, all these things that you're saying, these factors that are playing a role into what position do I have next, these are being heavily considered. Your family, the time you're spending away from your family, the time you want to spend interacting with your hobbies. Like once people started working from home, it was proof we could do this from home and things get done. Do we
Hmm.
really have to have an office for everything and every job? I mean,
Hmm.
overnight therapy, I went from having to travel to 14, 15 houses to telehealth in my room with the door closed on a computer. I mean,
Hmm.
everybody was doing telehealth. And now insurance, because we're going back to normal, they're starting to decrease what they pay people for telehealth. But I'm like, I don't think as much as companies want this to go away, I don't think it is. I
I
mean,
totally agree. I think that, the genie is out of the bottle and
right,
that, they can do as much as they want. I get that there
word
is
is
a
out.
lot of establishment that wants to go back. There's a lot of corporate real estate money in the US. There's a lot of reasons for them to push, but I don't think it will be possible because I think that, one, uh, I think a lot of people worked more at home than they actually did in person
Right.
because, one, they can roll over and start working, which some people did. Like
Jump
it's
out of
like,
bed. Totally
yeah,
capitalized on
I
that. Yeah.
put the Zoom top on and they're good to go.
Right. There's
You
no
know,
3 hours of driving, right? I know when I used to commute to higher ed, it was literally an hour and 15 minutes going there. When I was doing my internship, it was 3 hours to 3.5 a day traveling downtown. And
mhm,
my job that it was an hour and 15, literally 4 exits down from my house. Like we were in the same city. Like I was literally crossing the border from my city to this city where the job sat. So it wasn't like it was far, but traffic was, I mean, that was time I could have been home being productive instead of
abs-
being in the office. Yep.
absolutely. And then there's also all the things like if I want an extra cup of coffee, I will just walk over to my kitchen and make myself some coffee, as opposed to like when I worked in Midtown Manhattan and I wanted coffee, it was get up, think about it, to ask other, hey, anybody else want coffee?
Coworkers,
Anybody
everybody
else want
wanted
to
to give you
go?
this.
Then okay, yes. Oh, but let's go see if so and so who is in this
Down the
other
hall.
place,
Yeah.
like, oh, we gotta walk over there and like see, oh yeah, I do, but I just have to call so and so. So just hang for one sec. So you wait, they call
And then where are we
whoever.
getting it, right? Is it gonna be the boutique coffee? Is it like the run of
Oh,
the mill
yeah,
coffee? Is
we have
it
to argue
Starbucks?
about, like, are we going to Gregory's? Are we going to Dunkin'?
Yep,
Who or, whoever is the Starbucks person, who's gonna win today.
yep,
Then we gotta go there. Then we gotta wait in line because everybody else is doing the same thing.
right.
Then
Around the
you
same time.
yes, and then, do you want the muffin? There's some conversation about it.
Right.
Then you gotta wait for whatever it is you ordered. And then you have to decide, are you going to sit there? And I'm obviously drawing all this out because it's a point, right? It's so long. It takes so much time as opposed to
It
me just
does. It really does.
stepping to my kitchen. Same thing when it comes to lunch and, all of these
Mhm.
things. Then, of course, there's the fact that there's people like me in the world who just won't stop talking. And so there are other people who might be trying to work at their desks. And then all of a sudden, yeah, then there's us, right? And we are interrupting you. We are eavesdropping on your conversations. We are interrupting you.
Like thinking of who to talk to next.
Yes, I mean, it's just not it's not conducive
Productive,
to
right? It
productivity,
is. It's
right?
just
Yeah.
wonderful. Like it literally would be like, hey, like I'm ear hustling. You want to talk about? And it doesn't help that I'm a therapist, so now I'm ear hustling, and let's process that. Do you need a plan? Do you need? I
Yes.
remember they gave me this project one time, and my boss was like, I have to officially take her offline. The kids won't stop going to her office because I was the counselor on campus. And so he wanted this project. I think it's funny because it's a project that ultimately ended my position there, but they needed this project done by this deadline. And he even told me in a joking way, like, you can't skirt this deadline because I am good for skirting a deadline. If you don't know me, I've gotten much better, but I am good for skirting that thing till I can't skirt anymore. I remember in side story in undergrad, I got to the place in my English class. I had like three. I had a paper, a project, and a test all due. And then was washing dishes and like cut my hair really bad. So it's all bandaged up. And they said, well, can you get more time? And my roommate said, she's been getting more time. This is how we're here. She has no time left. It's like 2 days before the semester ends. So I do think that we built in this, but almost to a protective feature, right? Because we could go hang with our coworkers, have that interaction, have that connection, cut work off, and then kind of go home. But once
Mhm.
you kind of get used to home, you just integrate your day. And then my last guest was talking about then her day became longer, right? You're not done till 9, but you're okay with that if you can pick up your kids, if you could do dinner, if you could do
Yeah.
laundry, or think about doing laundry and really just grab coffee and look at laundry and say you should do laundry in
Yeah.
my case. So it does build this productivity because you are working more and you're having less time for other things because there's no I mean, you're not talking to your toddler about what their phone conversation was.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point, and that is something I've heard from a lot of people as well, which is that their day is expanded,
Mhm.
and they need to help with boundaries, right? To
Yes.
not just be working all the time. But a lot of the moms that I am, one, friends with or two, work with, they definitely feel exactly the same way, which is that it gave them a flexibility to
Yep.
be able to walk their dog or go see the kids concert or whatever.
Yes.
Um,
They had something at school.
yeah,
Play, festivities, track meets, field day. Mhm.
yes, that they could basically do all the things they always wanted to do,
Right.
and the work did not get done, it just maybe got done at 8:30 at night, or
Right.
I don't know, some weirdos 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever. Um, that's awesome. I love it.
When everybody sleep, if I go to bed at 9, I can get up. You know what's interesting is therapists, we talk about this, like, you may get up at 3 because you may not have time during the day to do your notes, and so
Mm.
notes mean you gotta get paid, so I used to take these weird naps and get up at 2, do notes till 4 or 5, take another nap, and get my kids ready for school, so it
That's
gave you that I see what you're saying, that flexibility.
I actually read an interesting article about that's how humans used to sleep, is in two sections, not just one. So I'm gonna send that to you after we're done. But that is, I think, a great way to operate. And again, it's all about uh, why did we have to be in person? We did it, and
At
now
this
that we all
point,
know
yeah.
that we don't, people don't. First of all, they don't want to go. They understand that they were able
Mhm.
to work just fine, and then I would say there's sort of two other factors, which is one I would say is the gaslighting. Like, nobody likes to be gaslit. So when
No.
someone starts to tell you about how much better it is in the office, and it's
When
all
you've been there or
Mhm.
you have been to
Yeah.
that office, it's not like you haven't like you're new to the corporation and you don't know
Yeah,
something new there.
exactly. Like, one of the things that I know is really, this is so common in New York City, I'm sure it's common in other places as well, but they don't actually have enough space for all the people in the office.
Wow.
So, um, one of the problems I used to have all the time was that I had to take confidential phone calls, but had no place to take a confidential phone call. So I might be
Wow.
like on my cell phone in the hallway and then see someone coming and like run, have to like get out of the way because I need to talk to HR or whoever about this contract or this situation, but there is actually no physical place at my university.
Wow.
Talk about, like, one of the problems that we always used to have was that there was never a place for people to pump. we had such a problem with getting a locked location
Room.
for any, any person that needed that space. That was near impossible. It was always a problem, and we always had a terrible situation where someone got walked in on. That always happened, always, right? They just don't have enough space in New York City. You're taking calls in the stairwell. You have a very loud colleague, it was me, who is on a meeting, and you can't hear what's going on. All of
Mhm.
these different things, and, and then you're encouraging people, "Come back to the office, it's great," and
Like,
then you're
why? You
dealing.
don't even have space. I have a door that closes at my house. Like, why would I never even thought about because in Atlanta, I do think they have space, and I think this is the push. Something you said earlier was very true about Atlanta, where this corporate real estate, right? I think that they had gotten into this space where now we're trying to keep our buildings. No one's using them. We can't justify these line items in our budget to get
Mhm,
these big high-rise buildings, especially in Atlanta, because I think sometimes they had more than enough space. I think about some of my friends' jobs where they had 2 and 3 locations. So now
mhm,
you see that they're closing these locations and moving them and condensing them to just 2 as opposed to 5. I mean, even the college I work for, they had 1 in Atlanta. Well, to be honest, they had 50 locations, and then they had 2 in bigger cities like Atlanta.
wow.
But you know what's interesting? The parent company was EDMC, and so if you look at all their brands, they would pair the buildings together. So you might have Augustine Art Institute, Brown Mackey,
Mm,
and it's a Southern University in these one buildings or 2 or 3 in one building. I think the Art Institute of Atlanta probably was the one that didn't because it literally filled top to bottom with Art Institute kids.
mm,
But, you're filling these corporate spaces and you're needing to. So I think that is a very like here it was the opposite. We're trying to bring people back because we have space and no one
mhm.
wants to come in. Now we're wasting money. How do we justify the
Yeah,
money that we're spending because there's not enough people here to justify having this however much the space is that you're renting because a lot of them don't own the building, you're renting it
mhm.
from someone.
Or if they did build it, for example, like, Apple
Oh,
or
yeah, Google.
Facebook,
Yeah,
Amazon, Google, right,
Microsoft,
all
yep.
these giant companies that built built full campuses, right? Mm.
Mercedes-Benz down here, when they moved here 'cause the stadium's here, they built a headquarters kinda thing. Porsche, yeah, they did. This
Yeah,
huge
so
building, gotta think about that.
all they invested a ton, and also I have a lot of clients whose industries follow them, so they might not work for they might not work in tech or social media or a SaaS or anything like that, but they basically are saying, "What's Facebook doing?" I refuse to call them
Yeah.
Meta, by the way,
Ah!
but,
I forget they're called Meta. I think that me and you are around the same age, and we remember when you had to have an EDU
yeah, you can't
email to
just
get on
change
Facebook.
your name because
No.
you did bad stuff, okay? So I'm gonna call you Facebook. So, but they check on them to see what the policy is because they do affect a large portion, obviously, of the workforce, but then other
Right.
people kind of watch them. So I think the fact that they have campuses has really affected why they want people back in person. But so there's that level of gaslighting. But some of the other anger that I hear from people is that their lives ended basically for
Yeah.
COVID, but they had to keep working. And so
Yeah.
they're kind of irritated about the fact that all of the fun, all of the social, all of the things that I found joy in. Some
Yeah.
people find joy going to the gym or watching sports or whatever. All of that ended, and yet I still had to work. And
Yep. That didn't end.
yeah, and basically, I would say there was this level of I don't know if I could noun it exactly, but this sort of sense of we're in this together. You're gonna keep
True. So, like, the camaraderie
working.
kinda thing, like, this is this camaraderie, but you don't feel connected to this camaraderie because you're not what are you getting out of it? You're getting like, I was exhausted, I can remember we had just had a baby, it was a newborn, like, you we're in this together, but what this together looked like for me when I'm the one sacrificing to be the together.
Yes,
So,
yes,
yeah,
that's such a great way to say it, that we're in this together, there's this camaraderie, and, but really that was all fake. It was just because we wanted our businesses to keep
right,
running,
right.
so we didn't have to fold, and we wanted you to make big sacrifices, and we didn't really do a great job in any of the things, and now we're
To
like,
help
"It's
you to with
over."
the sacrifices, yep.
Yeah, and also, obviously, I fall into the camp that believes it's not over, and that
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that we could do as a society that would one, help with COVID, but it would also help with so many other things.
Right.
It could help with flu and colds if we worked on our air filtration systems in buildings. So if
Yes. That
companies,
that was my biggest concern in schools. When you talk about filtration systems, I said, "We're gonna send our kids back." That was my biggest cry. If you heard me anywhere in Georgia is I used to go into these schools. The teachers do a phenomenal job, so you do not know how old these buildings really are, and that their windows still roll like this, or some of them
Mhm,
don't open. And now you're gonna stick these kids in buildings. I mean, people talked about defunding the police, but when I looked at what Georgia was really defunding, it was education to the tune of 30 mil for years. They have
mhm,
been defunding education. Nobody was upgrading these facilities. No, and I'm like, so my sons goes to a charter school, so they're allowed to raise money. You know what I
mm.
mean? And so they did redo their filtration system, but the schools, as a therapist, I may be going into in the inner city, who's to say that they redid all of the filtrate, and so I'm with you on the building. Like some of this stuff should have been done, period. Flus and see, like we had the
Mhm,
lowest flu numbers ever when we were wearing masks because people were wearing masks. And so my
mhm,
kid's doctor was warning me, we're not doing that now. We may have a really huge spike. It may be the worst flu season we've ever seen because now
mhm.
nobody wants to wear one because we've been wearing one for 2 years. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of on that train with you. I don't feel like it's fully over, that some of the things we were doing to protect, we may not do, and almost in a rebellion to the fact we had to do them for so long.
Well,
In
and
terms of
I love wearing masks. I found an N95 I like to wear, and it's
I was
so
about to say you found the
comfortable.
really cool one that was, like, thick and it was and it was
Yeah,
over
it's
the nose and the
the
chin. Yeah.
3M Aurora is what it's called, and I think it's so comfortable. I really like wearing it. Um, my husband has really giant head. I love you, husband, by the way. But so, and it even fits him. I have a tiny, awkward pinhead. So the way that it works is that
You know,
it
our husbands are both named Michael. My husband's is
is a must be something about the name, but it
Ah!
has like a wire built in. Like it's so comfortable. I love it, and I think two studies that have come out in the pandemic that I thought were really interesting. One was around flu, and it was that the percentage of people. Oh, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My screen went like. I didn't know. But so the and I don't remember the exact percentage, but it was the percentage of people who got the flu after seeing the doctor when the case before them was a person who was getting tested to see if they had the flu. So the next person after them, it was a insanely high number.
Wow.
And so I just thought that was so fascinating that, the flu has been spreading for years at doctors'
Right.
offices because you don't know if the person in front of you, like the last patient before you was there for the flu.
Right.
And then the other thing that study that I read was about that office air, essentially, like office buildings have been terrible for air quality for many, many, many years, and that
Mhm.
this is a really good opportunity to reevaluate what we allow in corporate buildings
Right.
as far as air recycling and how illness spreads through these buildings and just how they're generally sort of unhealthy as far as dust and things like that are concerned. But so for all of these reasons, people are fed up, they're done, they want to leave. And I think it is honestly, I've worked with a lot of people who it would be hard for them to re-enter the workforce. So I work with people who maybe took time off because their parents were very ill on
Mhm.
hospice. They were their caretakers. I've worked with people, a lot of stay-at-home parents who they didn't think they were going to ever get to really re-enter the workforce either because it was never going to be flexible enough for them
Yeah.
to be able to watch their kids do what they need to do there and then go back. Or the other thing would be that they felt like if they were going to go back to the workforce, that they would have to take a significant step down from where they
Mhm.
were and start basically entry level. And
Right.
what I've seen in the Great Resignation is that that is just not that's not what's happening right now. And so if there was ever a time where a stay-at-home parent who might have been out of the workforce for 5 or 6 years could come in and not only get a position at the level that they left the workforce, but get a better position,
Wow.
that is what I've been seeing. So, um, the other thing I would say is that a lot of people that work with me in particular are people in what I would say the same as you is you went into your profession because you cared deeply about it.
Mhm.
and now it's not serving you in the
Yep.
same way anymore, either because the situation itself got toxic, like the organization or the entity, or because of what's happening in the world is very complex and
Very
difficult
good.
and hard to deal with. But so these are people in essentially some type of helping profession who are ready to uh, be less tired all the time, uh, get paid a rate that actually
Right, yeah. A
allows.
wage, a living wage. It's so crazy how we pay our helping professionals that take on the burdens emotionally of those around. Like, it is you look at the pay scale when coming out of school, it's like, no, and they're like, "We need more men." I'm like, "Men are not taking this pay scale. If you want more men, you really gotta do something about how you treat interns coming out." And depending on what state, depends on kinda how you pay too, so I can
Yeah,
feel that one.
it's abysmal, the pay. But when I one of the questions I always ask people is, "What pay are you looking for?" You know, what are we talking about here, to kind of see what they want. And never have I ever heard someone say, first of all, they don't confidently say anything like, "I want
Mm,
6 figures," or whatever. They're more trepidatious about it and say, "Well, I kinda think it'd be nice if this happened." And I'd say, "Okay, what do you make now?" And I am legit shocked constantly at how little these people are paid that I'm working with. I'm working with people who are at director level, um, senior director level, AVP or VP level, who are getting paid just embarrassing amounts, 40,000,
wow.
60,000. And I say, I've worked with people at your level and gotten double that, you know?
Right.
Um,
Well, you should I would think 6 figures at starting at director, so yeah.
Yeah, so I've worked with multiple people in the Great Resignation who have doubled their pay.
Nice.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it's life changing,
Right.
and one of the things I also think i- that is really useful about this time is that in normal times, a layoff can completely throw off your entire career trajectory. The
Yeah.
statistics are that most people who get laid off never achieve the same pay again from what they left.
Wow.
It's almost completely deep. Uh, I don't know, crashes everything that they were trying to do in their careers. And when I talk to people who have been laid off in other time periods, that is something I hear is that, I was making da da da, I got laid off. It took me a while to get a new job. I got this one and that one and that one, but I'm still not making, what I
What I was
made
making
then,
sure. Yeah.
which I think is, obviously really, really terrible. And it will change what you make over the course of your entire life. And so one of the things that I've worked with people in the Great Resignation is people who had been laid off, either because of the pandemic. I mean, I would say most people it's because of the pandemic,
Right.
economic contraction. But then also people have been fired and stuff like that. And we are able to increase their pay. And so that's sort of, I would say, how wild this time is that you don't need to just accept that, oh, you were laid off. So now that means you're cast off goods and you're not, worthwhile. Getting
I
laid
like
off.
that idea though that because of this time period, this kind of very, very different time period, that you don't have to accept just anything because a lot of times when you're laid off, that's how you decrease your pay. You're just trying to find. I remember when I got laid off from teaching, it was I went back into therapy because that's the skill set I had. I didn't really have time to. I was looking for other jobs, but I really didn't have time to take. And so actually what's interesting is she told me, well, if you can't do this city, we're not gonna accept you. And so I rewrote her and was like, I heard you get other regions. I don't want that region. Give me the one that's in the school. I'm
Mhm,
literally teaching. Give me the one that's in the schools. And
mhm,
she did, at the time, but it was still a paid, the way that it worked, it ended up being kind of a paid. It looked on paper like it was more, but in therapy, we all know it was more.
mhm,
And so, because even though what's interesting is at teaching, I was getting paid 18. At therapy, I was getting paid 30 an hour. But if
mm,
you're a therapist, you know what that means. It's not a teacher hour. It's not the 8 hours a day hour. It's a per
mhm,
client kind of thing.
mhm.
So I see what you're saying that when you get laid off, you think you have to take less. But what you're saying now is because of this kind of very significant time in history, you can make not only what you were making, probably double.
Yeah,
Are there any tips
absolutely.
and tricks you have for negotiating when you come to this? Did you, 'cause I hear you said that people are also very timid when they talk salary, what they want. Is there like one good tip you can give people when they're trying to negotiate these things, what they should do or say?
Well, I my first tip is, because I don't think I've ever had one anything in my life, but my first tip is that you really need to know what it is that you want to make, and give yourself a sense of sort of, what do you need to make? Like, do
Mm,
you understand your budget inside and out so you know what you actually need to make?
that's a
And
good tip.
then what would you want to make? What would feel good? Nothing feels worse than when you accept a job where you're not happy with the pay, you're not happy with the benefits, you're not happy with the role, and you just kind of feel like crap even in accepting the job.
Yeah.
And I think that you don't have to do that. The other thing I think is that if you don't know what you want to make, and you don't know what you need to make, then it's very hard to go after the right kind of roles.
True.
There are for example, the role of program manager or program management
Mhm.
in higher ed. Role of program management is pretty early startup kind of role, early career. Um, Probably starts around 45, 50, maybe
Yeah.
maxes out at like 60, 70, 80. But in program management, in a for-profit corporate sense, those roles can be like, average pay is like 120 to
Yep. Yeah, I was
140,000.
thinking that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Totally different.
if you're just applying for every program management job and you apply at a nonprofit, then it's not going to be great. But if you're applying for program management jobs at for profits, they're going to be much, much better. So some people will talk about what is the role pay, and I think it's important to understand, like, what is the role pay, but what is the industry pay? And Glassdoor is a great place to kind of get a sense of what other people are reporting at their salaries. Now,
Nice.
also, the great state of Colorado has done us many favors because they passed a law that salary ranges had to be posted in the job posting. And so when you're looking at remote work, if the entity, the company is looking for Colorado residents, they will have to post the pay. Some
Nice.
people will go so far to not post the pay that they will say, anyone but Colorado may apply for this job.
That is just so at that point, you're just like, because that means you're trying, and that I think is if I see that, that should be a warning to whoever, because to
Yeah.
me that says you don't want to pay me what this job is worth. And as a therapist, I feel like it says you're going to overwork me. Do you hear me? When they cannot, I think about the jobs that I had where I said I could do all these things, then they gave me all these things and they did not pay me what
Mhm.
I was doing. I remember them piling things on my plate. I was going to be over graduation. That was when I left the role. I was going to be the one doing all of graduation and programming it and managing it. And I'm like, are y'all gonna give me a raise? We'll talk about talk. You just gave me veterans, you just gave me some financial aid stuff. You're talking graduation, like you're already putting on the calendar what this looks like for graduation is huge. Like that
Mhm.
is a huge event. You start a year in advance prepping everything and you're saying we'll think about it. So I think that is a good tip. That one, I love what you said about what do you need and then what do you want? Do you understand your budget? What is your lifestyle? Because I think if your lifestyle is in Florida versus Georgia versus New York, it may be different. You may be okay with 60.
Mhm.
But if you live in a certain part of Georgia, now you live in my part of Georgia, you're gonna be mad. So you need to understand that
Yes.
what do you need to really, really live? What is your budget? And then what do you want? Because then what happens if I get a job and it only covers my needs, right? Now you're
Mhm.
ticked because you like to travel and you can't, right? You want a new car and you can't. You can't
Mhm.
go up or you're gonna have to downgrade your car. You know what I mean? So understanding these are the basic things I can accept,
Mhm.
but this is over here. Right here is what I really would like to have this comfortable lifestyle or what I would want. So
Yeah. So that I think so crucial. So the need and then the want, and then an understanding about what the industry pays in addition to the role. And again,
yeah.
Glassdoor is a great place to look at that. And then the other thing that I would say is that when you're in the negotiation process, you really have to understand if you can walk away or not.
Mm,
So if you're absolutely screwed, if you need health insurance and yours is about to run out or you don't have it and it's causing you real problems and you really need to take this job, then you're just going to have to take the job. But what the crucial part is you don't have to stay. at the job, right? There used to be this
I think you need to say that again because people will say that this is a question I hear a lot. Well, I just started 2 weeks ago, but now the job I really want has said they want to hire me. Do I leave this new job in a bind? Kristen, what do you say to that though? I've just
I
started this
say
job.
I say yes. I say yes. So fundamentally, if your work needed to lay you off to save itself, it would do so.
Say that again. They will every time. Do you hear me? I look like if they misread, if they misdo, if they gotta save a line item or budget. There was a CEO that literally said, "Look, your name's like sorry to say, in case you thought different. It's 30,000 people here. You got your names are on a page. Okay, unless you stand out to me, I don't know you, and don't think that I'm telling you. Like it's a lot to try to know 30,000 people. So if
Yeah.
I gotta cut 10,000 of them, guess what?
Yeah.
To save the whole company."
Yeah, I've had clients who they were brought in to run a certain part of the business, and then the company was they were kinda testing, they weren't really sure if they
Oh
were
my
gonna
goodness.
keep
Yeah.
this, and then it didn't work, and then they got laid off after 3 months or something like that.
Yep.
And so, the company was allowed to not be sure and
Yep.
test out, and you turn down other jobs, and this is your life, and this is your family's insurance, and
Right.
now they've decided that it didn't work, so you're all laid off.
Mhm.
What?
Right.
What?
That's
And
very
so
true.
we're all conditioned to do the best thing for the company. And what we have to do is the best thing for ourselves.
Right.
And you absolutely can leave a job, you know, immediately if you need to. And I've certainly worked with people who, and this was in the before times where it was a little it was a little faux pas-ish, and so we would just maybe keep that job off the resume that you only worked at 2 weeks or something like that. But now in the Great Resignation, people are moving so fast that it's just so much less awkward. I prep clients who have awkward stories all the time when we do their interview prep about how do you explain this weird thing or why you're going to do this now and when you didn't do it before or whatever.
Yeah.
And the only time out of 100 clients in the Great Resignation that I have worked with, I had one person who regularly got the question, why are you looking to come into this position? And she was normal. She was employed. She had no weird story. Nothing strange had happened to her. So, I mean, I still prep normal people for questions like that anyway, but
Yeah.
I just thought it was so weird. I said, there's nothing about your background or history that would make one ask this question. And yet, for some reason, in her industry, it was very common to
People are
ask.
asking
But
it. Wow.
I've talked to people who've been fired, laid off, again, stay-at-home parents, people who watch their parents, took care of their parents as caregivers on hospice, all these different things. No one has asked them, literally no one. One normal person, she got that question all the time. So
Wow.
I think it's just people are way more comfortable with the idea that people are leaving jobs really quickly. People are quitting without other jobs and just taking time off. There's just
Yeah.
so much more comfort. And so what I say to people is, if you do have a weird story, you get to keep it hidden. LinkedIn just added this new feature where you can explain your career breaks.
Saw that. Yes.
I said, screw that. Like, you don't have to explain shit. These people don't deserve to know everything about you just because they're going to employ you. I
Right.
think that's weird and creepy. Um, you don't have to tell people you got laid off. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. No one is entitled to know everything about your story. Yes,
And
if
they
you're
do feel entitled. I think that's what's interesting about everything is that they do feel entitled to like tell like why I mean I've been asked that on my resume. Well, you keep jumping industries. I'm like, well, it's only two. Education and therapy, and they usually are intertwined in some kind of form that I'm a therapist in the schools or
no,
I taught, but we did a lot of social emotional learn like you have to teach social emotional learning in pre-K. Like it's a thing. So I
no,
see that they do feel entitled to know, well, what did you do with your life in this time span? I
yeah,
didn't work, but I have a lot of history working. Do you want me or not? And I think that in this market, which is good to know, you don't have to keep explaining this gap. Or my thing is, lots of times people have babies. I had
mhm,
2 kids, you know what I mean? So if you look at my employment, it may have those gaps where I had kids and I had to take off for a
yeah.
couple of months to have children, but why do
What
I
if you had been in a car accident? What
that
if,
too?
there are so many things that happen in a person's life that causes them to leave the workforce. Again, I always tell my clients, if you are applying for jobs with the FBI, then we will do a very fine level of very correct details. Okay. But if you are not applying to a job where you might have access to weapons, bombs, nuclear sites or whatever, then
Right.
I think we can not tell them, that we got,
We're good here.
laid off or fired or whatever.
Or they
And I,
ask the question, "Can we talk to your boss?" No, you can't. Like, especially if it's 10 years ago. I don't even know if that boss is still there.
yeah,
Like that and I wonder, is this a thing where they just need to update these systems? Because I think my boss, I know for a fact because we're friends on LinkedIn. If you go looking at the place he was my supervisor at, he's not there. He's been to 2 other institutions. He's still in higher ed, but I am not. So if
mhm,
you're looking to test my therapy skills, go ask the guy that was over in high, what are you going to ask him?
yeah.
Who's not even at that same place. So I think that is interesting that they want this information to make a determination if you're a good worker or not. And the truth is, employers, most of the times when you hire these people very quickly, they usually aren't the good work. Like when I see my friends that aren't good workers, they're the ones that get the jobs the quickest. It's not never the people that work well. It's sometimes they got to go see Kristen to get an executive coaching to help pivot. It's the people that you don't want working for you, you are hiring on the spot. So I think
Yeah.
some of these questions are
Well,
interesting.
I think that there's some people have a really easy time selling themselves,
Mhm.
and they kind of like talk the talk and the smooth,
If
and
you do it a lot, you should, right? If I'm always firing or, I always have to sell you
yeah.
on who I am.
I was working with this one client, and she and her coworker were both trying to leave at the same time, and she had
Mm,
hired me, and I was helping her, and he was working by himself, and she told me that he was having an interview with Nike, and I was, wow, that's really impressive. I said, why don't you ask him if he'll be comfortable sending his materials over to you, just so we can take a look. I'm just so curious, how he got the interview. So she asked him, and she shared hers with him, and I was looking at his stuff, and it was terrible. It was awful, and I said, how did this happen? So I asked her, I said, do you happen to know how he got the interview? And she said, oh,
right.
through like a friend who he called who worked there, and they like passed him up. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense, because no one in their right mind would get these materials and bring this man in for anything, because it is clear that he is just, you know
Mm,
and that's what she said. She said he just like talked his way into jobs. And I mean, that is a
wow.
skill, and that is awesome, and more power
Mm,
to anyone that
yeah,
can do that. What I work with people on is the idea of getting interviews off your resume,
right.
because that's what I've done. I don't particularly like talking to people. Like I don't like networking. I don't like doing cold reach out or any of that kind of stuff. I know there are a lot of coaches and folks who teach that.
Mhm.
They're very good at it, and I think that if it's something that you want to try, it's totally awesome and great. I just not my thing, and I think it's fascinating uh, how putting a covering of bullshit on anything can help it work, and
Well, that's
that's
great.
and that's kind of why I think that you know people should care less about all these normal rules about
Yeah.
how to do things, because it's really just BS. People bring in people for interviews all the time because they know their father or their friend
Yeah.
works wherever, and they don't have the skills
Yeah.
or the
Especially in
background.
higher ed, you see that a lot. That one girl that I used to work with went on 24 interviews at this one institution, and finally she said it was to the point the people at the front door knew her name. And she said, "Finally, what am I doing wrong? Can you guys give me feedback?" She said, "I will be honest. Every interview you've been on is already it's kind of been a fake interview because they already have who they want there. They've already
Mhm.
had the person picked, so they're just bringing you in to do their due diligence to say they offered it to everybody."
Yep.
So you're kind of right in the sense that what they're looking for, you may or may not know.
Yeah.
Um,
I tell this to my clients all the time when they're upset when something doesn't work our way. I say, there are so many factors in play that we have no idea about. We don't
right,
know if the role was already promised to someone else.
right.
Someone else is a friend. You look like someone's ex. Like, who knows? We
I
have
never thought
no
of that, but
idea.
that could be true. When you come in,
Yeah.
I know one of my friends who's in corporate America talks about wearing very conservative makeup and a bun a lot because they're single and they're like, well, they're getting ready to get married, but at the time they were single. They're like like in their 20s, 30s, and these
Mhm.
men are married. So dress conservative suits, and because you don't want to be appeared as, oh, I could have an affair with this, so I just
Yeah.
want to tone things down. So I never thought, but that is true. Women
I
have
coach
so many other
people.
things you have to think about.
Yeah, this is one of the big coaching things that I do with folks is, particularly in the interview prep, is I coach them on the biases that they're gonna encounter with the
Mm,
people that they interact with, because everyone is biased. If I would say most of the time, people don't recognize that they have any biases at all,
mhm.
as those are the worst kind of people, right? And so
Right, right.
you're navigating, people have biases against people who are married, people who are not married, people who like to take
Yep.
vacation, people who like sports, people who like to drink, people who, um,
Have a family, people who don't have a family.
yes, all of these things. So the whole goal is to try to be as
Neutral.
sort of neutral with the fact that you're still a person, right? You can't just go in and be a robot. You have to have some sense of personality. But we do a lot of practice on what kind of information do you reveal, what kind of information do you not reveal, and what's the order of information that you give
Ooh,
people.
that's good. I never thought of the ordering of information, even though I'm a timeline person. I think that's a really good thought to what order do you present? And then how much do you, because sometimes we can over present too much information. It's like they don't need to know
Mhm.
all that. One of my colleagues thinks that that's kept them from a job when they kind of the last part of the interview when they were like, yeah, my wife's pregnant. And next thing you know, they chose someone else. And he's like, I
Mhm.
knew it. I knew I shouldn't have said it.
Oh, yeah. I always tell people, you don't if you're pregnant, you don't say it. If your partner's pregnant, you don't say it. If you're looking to adopt, you don't say it. Any of that. You just don't say it because people have opinions, and whether again, they're obviously different states have different laws about, those things, but in general, they don't have to tell anyone why you weren't the pick, right?
Right.
So, they can keep their bias private and just think, we don't want someone who's then gonna be all caught up in, overnights
Extra
and
stuff. Yep.
yeah. Um, I do talk a lot to when I'm doing the coaching on the interviews, I talk a lot about the order of information, because the way that I think, the human brain works is that if you say something to someone that causes them to go, "Yeah, yeah," then they have a hard time listening to the next couple things that you say. So I always work with my clients on you say this, and then you say this, and then you say this. And you have to say it in that order, because if you say this part first, they're gonna think this thing and not hear the other two.
Mhm.
So you have to sort of deliver, and this is really crucial for pivoters. And I would say, imagine this happens to you with the difference between education and therapy, is that when you go in for a therapy interview, you would have to seem super therapy with a side of education, and then education would be super education with a side of therapy. And
Yep.
if let's say you had 5 pieces of information you wanted to deliver, and 3 of them were therapy and 2 of them were ed. In therapy interviews, you would want to make sure you did 3 and 2. And if in an ed interview, you would want to do 2 ed and 1 therapy and keep the other 2 therapy out, because if you had done all 3, then they say, oh, she's not really an educator, she's a therapist,
Yep.
just trying to get an education job. And people are really weird about.
Sticking to your industry or expertise. I even found that like they want you to stick to what they feel as opposed to dabbling in what they feel they're experts in. So I find that's interesting because I feel like those two overlap. Because the reason I went into therapy was because I would see so much going on with my kids. I'm like, I can't help all 26 kids at one time. If I become a therapist, I can help them one at a time, integrate those behaviors in the classroom. But they really are like when I wanted to go back and say, hey, let me teach early childhood at higher ed, they're like, mm-mm, you need a master's of education. Like they specifically want you to they are sticklers about their industries a lot of times. Like we call it gatekeeping in therapy, but I think sometimes it's become more than that, gatekeeping because you want to protect those coming in, your clients, potential clients, people seeking out therapy. You want them to have the best experience. The first rule of therapy is do no harm. But
Mhm,
also, I think we have become kind of these industry hoarders, if that makes sense, where it's
mm,
my industry, no one gets in, And so even this debate all the time in these therapy groups, coaching versus therapy. And I'm like, I'm doing both because I needed a break. And
yeah.
even in therapy, I found that the communication piece of it was much needed before I could help you process your trauma. Because if you can't label your feelings and thoughts and patterns, if these skills are not in place, then me having you do the heavy lifting wasn't really working. If you couldn't communicate that, I found especially with my teens, the one question I would say, your mom is asking, is the answer really no? Or would you like more time to think about what the answer is? And then you probably would have an answer.
Mm.
9 times out of 10, I had one kid that said no. The rest of them, out of hundreds of kids, actually, that's actually spot on. If I had
Mm.
more time. So I think that we get into these spaces where we hoard our industry, calling it gatekeeping, when really a lot of these things overlap. And it
Mhm.
sounds like you even teach your clients these transferable skills, what skills they have that can transfer over. Like you said, in program management, right? In
Mhm.
higher ed, it looks one way. And tech industry totally different. Like, I could apply for program manager jobs in higher ed. My husband was a program manager. The pay definitely did not match what he was making in technology. So I
Mhm.
think that the order is really something that is very a good technique that you have to, because if we're industry hoarders, right? And we don't
Mhm.
want anybody, then you have to speak to that, because that was the one thing I got. Well, you've jumped industries. I'm like, yeah, but they're cohesive. But people don't want to hear that a lot of times, if they're,
Yep.
especially if they're not in the industry. Someone that's in the industry may understand if they've done the work. If you haven't really done the work, like you own a daycare but you never taught, right?
Mhm.
Or you own a tech firm, but you've never really coded. You may not understand that somebody that has written requirements across several different platforms is still going to be good for somebody that's writing requirements for coding.
Mhm.
So I think that ordering, I never thought of that, but that is really probably a crucial piece to breaking that gate for industry hoarders.
Mm. I like that you call it that. I'd not heard that term, and I think it's really interesting. What I always tell people is that, um, the whoever has gone into whatever industry it is, let's say you went into learning and development, and now you're a teacher or a higher ed, professor who's trying to break into learning and development. They could this transferable skills are completely there. You could
Mhm.
absolutely do it. But the person who is hiring is probably someone who has been learning and development ride or die for decades, right? And
Decades.
so they want to see some respect, or as
Mm.
I might say, they want you to kiss the ring. Okay. And so um if you tell them that, like, my experience with blah 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 is relevant and related or whatever, that is not necessarily the appropriate level of kiss the ring. So what I often encourage people to do is to go take a couple LinkedIn learning classes in
Mm.
learning and development. If you take, 2 or 3 classes, and then you can put those on your continuing ed section of your resume, they're gonna appreciate that, because they're gonna say, "This person respects my industry and that it's
Enough to learn more
different."
about it. There you go. That's true.
Yeah, so that's what I often recommend people to do, and then depending upon how intense or weird your industry is, you might have to do a more formal certificate,
Mhm.
but you can do those at Coursera or edX for, you could often take some of them for free, or if you
Mm.
want the audit certificate, it's like $50, which again, I only recommend if you're applying for a job with the FBI, because who freaking cares if you got the audit certificate? But some people really do. But so the other thing I say, in addition to that sort of kiss the ring thing, is that nobody believes polymaths are real people. So no one believes you can be good at multiple things at the same
Mm.
time. For whatever reason,
Right.
they
Even though
just
we're all
don't.
forced to do it every day.
Yeah,
No one believes
exactly.
we can.
But no one can believe, like, in the theater world, no one can believe that you could be a good actor and a good technician, let's say,
Hmm.
right? Everyone's like, actors are so different, and technicians are so different, and they're not the same at all, and da da da. When of course people can be good at many different things. But
Right.
so I work with a lot of people who are very talented at many things. And one of the things that I tell them is, you may not tell anyone that you're good at many things. It has to be a secret. When we're presenting a face to someone, it has to match what their expectation is. And so if they're trying to hire an X person, and that group has a lot of bias around another group, we have to keep that hidden or secret.
Wow.
Uh,
Mhm.
and so you can be talented at a couple things if they're very closely tied together. But if you said you were, I don't know, an amazing video editor and also really great at data analytics, most people would
They're
be
not gonna
like,
believe it too. Yep.
yeah, they wouldn't believe it. And then the other thing that I would say is that, and this just came up with a client of mine, that for some reason people want to hire people that they believe that this is achieving a part of their live stream, or like the next step in their process,
Yeah,
or
it's just
whatever.
true. How long are you gonna be with us? I've got that question that people want you to
Yeah.
almost, pledge your loyalty up front. How long are you gonna be here? Do we get to keep you for years as opposed to 6 months to a year? And it's like
Yeah.
you're almost having to pledge that loyalty to them.
Yeah. And I think it's part of the idea that they think that I think it's like the let's say the positive spin we could put on it is that they think that you'll be happier at the job if the job is a part of your path that you're
Mhm.
working on as a
And
person.
stay longer.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
on the negative side, I would say that it's because they believe they can exploit you more if this is a
Hmm.
part of your process. Like if this is the next step to your next job, then this has to go well so you can get to that next step and et cetera, et cetera.
Ah.
But again, either way, nobody needs to know everything about your life or what you're thinking about. I would love to be a barmaid. I think it would be awesome.
You probably would
But
make a really good one too.
great barmaid. But I'm never gonna go into an interview, and thank heavens don't have to go into them anymore. But I'm never gonna go in an interview and say, I have this vision of like a seaside bar that travelers come into, and that I hear their stories, and there's like maybe a musician. Like nobody wants to hear that. I'm not gonna get the job. Although I do like.
Unless you're applying to be a barmaid.
Yes, then it would be great. They'd be like, "Oh my god, you're perfect." But, I'm not gonna do that because what I encourage people to do is, "Okay, we're looking at the job posting, da, da, da. The next step naturally would be this." So when they ask you, "What do you wanna do in 5 years?" You have to say what would make sense for the person who would get this job.
Mm.
If you say something else, like I once had a client who told the people in her next 5-year question, she's like, I'm having this debate about do I want to go in this path or do I want to go in this path? And I'm not really sure, but I'm thinking like, and I was like, never do that again, ever. That is not what you
'Cause
want
they're
to
gonna say
say.
you're waffling, they're gonna say you're not the uncertainty of it is what they're gonna pick apart and be like, "You're not right, you're not ready, right? You're not right for this," and to say, "Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense."
Even though it's perfectly normal to not know exactly what path you want to go on.
Right.
Uh, it's ridiculous to assume that you like I thought I had high hopes that we were going to end this predicting the future type questions because nobody knew there was going to be a pandemic for
That's
multiple
true.
years.
Here we are. Yeah.
So maybe we could stop trying to predict the future or even an understanding of, I mean, whole industries have been completely decimated by the pandemic.
Right.
And they might not ever come back to the same level, or they're going to come back in a totally different way. And if you had been interviewing those people 5 years ago, asking like, what do you think you may be doing? Well, I think my industry is going to exist. How about that, right?
I think I'm gonna be able to do something in this same industry that I'm now having to pivot out of. Right.
Yeah, so I think, anyway, I was hopeful that was gonna happen. It doesn't seem to have yet. But I really like this concept, industry hoarder. These like gatekeepers like blockers. They're like,
They are because we say that so much in theory. Oh, gatekeepers, gatekeeper. But I have come to detest the term because I'm like, I know that I'm a great clinician, but this gatekeeping stuff you keep saying that we need to be doing is really just a barrier to me being a fully licensed person. Like when I tell you I've literally jumped through hoop, it's so interesting because in Georgia you have to be licensed, you have to get an associate license, but you have to have all this paperwork. So literally because of COVID, as you said, the pandemic, it held up all my paperwork. So when
mm,
I got ready to take my test, I only had one shot. Well, I had a bunch of heavy cases, and I'm like, dude, like I'm getting sleepy, I'm getting tired, and I missed it by like 10 points. But I could
mm,
tell when I was gonna fail because I was like, click, 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 I just want out of here. And it's like wrong,
yeah.
wrong, wrong, wrong. I was like, oh, stop, stop. Okay. I said, if I fail, it's gonna be this moment right
Well,
here.
and why do we still do tests like that anyway? I used to in my
5 p.m., Kristen. It was late, and I was like, "Dude, give me." I was drinking coffee. I wanted to take it at 9. I'm older now. When
mm,
I was fresh, these
mhm,
jokers, 5:45.
mm, that's awful. You know, my son is in virtual school, and so he takes his tests at home.
Mhm.
And sometimes they're timed, sometimes parts of them are timed and sometimes they're not or whatever. But he was doing a math test the other day. And so the math test starts. He's doing the test. He said, Mom, may I please have some carrots? Okay, I get him some carrots. He's like munching on the carrots. He like gets up, he goes and uses the restroom, he comes back, he's like still working on the test. He took his sweet ass time. And he got a perfect score on it. And I said,
Good job.
that was what he needed to do to take
Right.
the test. I mean, he doesn't have a secret book of first grade math problems to try
He's
to like
booking it.
sneak the answer or something like that. He's just wandering around and snacking and
Time, right.
using the restroom and drinking some water and so can he demonstrate that he has the knowledge that they're trying to see if he got
Right.
through his learning? Yes. He can demonstrate it. He's got it. He's good. He didn't need to do it in a classroom with other children who finish faster than him, who are then talking to the teacher about what comes next, and he's getting distracted
And then you
or
feel the pressure to finish fast because I know my kid is now back. He was home for 2 years, but he does exactly what you say. He feels the pressure and he wants to be done first, and then it's not correct. And his
Mhm.
teacher is like, got the paper and she's looking and he's looking. She's like, "You sure?" And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like,
Yeah.
"Are you sure? Like, this is a hint, dude. Like,
Mhm.
take this paper." So I like that, he gets to have that space to prove that he knows the knowledge without that time constraint of
Yeah, or the
10 minutes.
distractions, because I like my
Yeah.
son absolutely contest, he wants to win. He wants to be done first. And then if other students started to move on to the next thing,
He's not having it.
oh no, he would have to be a
And see,
part
this
of
is
it.
a lot I get so frustrated because I feel like this is most boys, but we don't teach to how they learn, and so they do this consistently, and we
Mhm.
have it as an education system saying, "You know what? This kinda isn't working for our boys.
Mhm.
We need to do something different." It's like, "Yeah, they'll figure it out in high school. We'll make" it doesn't.
Yeah.
This is how boys do, and we do not
Yeah, and
have
I
a
think
classroom to support that.
doing his classwork the way that works best for him, and then
Mhm.
getting the score that is the accurate assessment of what he
Right.
has learned,
Accurate. Yeah.
um, it helps him confidence-wise,
Right.
so that he got 100 on his math test, and he was like, "Hmm,
Yeah, you
okay,"
know.
And
Yeah.
so, not that he has to get 100, obviously, I just wanna know what he knows and what we need to work on, but, uh it's so interesting to me because there were all I obviously went through a sort of normal education system and don't have tremendous amount of thoughts about what worked and what didn't. I know what annoyed
Mhm.
me or whatever, but, I don't have huge, deep, theoretical thoughts about education system.
What's the reason why I have these thoughts is I taught pre-K and then I went right into teaching college. And not teaching college, but I was the student support and disabilities coordinator. So if you had a disability, you came to me, and I would often have to talk to the professors about it. I'm listening to them talk about their classes, and that's when I kind of was like, there's a lot of
Mhm,
correlation. And then the joke became, you don't know such and such. Like you were supposed to learn this in pre-K. Like you don't have
mm,
13 years of grades, and nobody happened to mention that this
mhm.
could be something that you need in life. They're like,
Yeah,
no, no. But
yeah. And that's because we don't actually look at the individual person. And also, if he had gone in and just turned in a solid B or whatever, that would have been fine and everyone
right,
would have said okay. But in actuality, he could do better than that if he wasn't trying to rush or,
yep.
whatever is happening. But it's so interesting to watch with him again because there were things I wouldn't have ever thought about, and then I see what he does, and then I see the result, and I go, "Oh, this is really interesting. Like,
This
this
works
is
for
why
him.
it works for him," which I really like, and,
Me too. That he
I
has
think
a routine because by the time he has to reintegrate to wherever this looks like, he will then know how he learns best. And I always encourage parents, figure out how your kid learns best, and then you can modify what that looks like. Because
mhm,
if they are an audio learner and they learn best by songs and listening, then you making them stare at a paper to study for a test isn't helpful, but you and them recording their voice of
mhm,
information and them playing it in their earphones is helpful, right? So if
mhm,
it's they need more time, they need to see it as opposed to write it, or if they need to sing it or write, or touch it, feel it, build. My son is a builder.
mm,
He needs to touch it,
mm,
feel it, build it. So I have to sometimes modify, like, okay, my husband is good for pulling out Fortnite at this point. All right, we're in Fortnite, right?
yeah,
Because then he can put his mind in we're in Fortnite. We only have this many vehicles, but we need this many potatoes, and we need, you know what I mean? He's like, oh snap, we're gonna die, right? If we don't eat, we're gonna
yes, exactly. I think that's my son too, like, the manipulatives are really, really helpful. Do you have a visitor?
Yes, as you see the visitor busted in, right?
Yeah,
The nap time is apparently over, and the visitor has
yes.
busted in.
I definitely understand that. I'm surprised, like, here, because it's like sliding doors, they would just like, "Hello." Uh, so I definitely want to make sure that everybody watching or listening definitely gets the main theme here, which is that this is a unique time in history.
Nice.
You have so much opportunity to do even more
Mhm.
than you might think is possible. So there are tons of remote jobs, that more than a third than normal remote jobs. Lots of options if you don't want to go back to an office. And then conversely, if you really do want to go back in the office, nobody's applying for those jobs. So you go for that and you can get those more easily than you can for remote jobs. Remote jobs are getting almost 3 times more applicants than in-person jobs. So you have to apply to more remote jobs to get one. But I definitely recommend it. And, leaving your current position is the fastest way to get more money. At this point, any raise that you get at a company that you're at, probably not going to match inflation. Whereas if you move on to another organization, the stats are, you'll increase your pay somewhere between 10 and 12%. And again, many of my clients have doubled their pay in the Great Resignation.
I like that you said that you may have to move on to another organization. Like, I feel like that's corporate America's best kept secret that they don't want you to know, is that a couple of my friends in corporate America have talked about, if you ever want to build your career, you are definitely going to always have to leave the company. But no one says that. You just understood it. And she even said the spouses, depending on if the industry, they would move for each other's careers. If the wife gets a better job here, but it's the same company that they're working for, they just have the spouse transfer. The person that is getting the higher pay, that you move around. And so I think that those are some really, really good tips about how to take advantage of this time in history to really kind of put yourself in the position you want. Some people want to have these places where they can move in their career or pivot, or even if you're saying, like, if you want more pay but you like your industry, maybe you just need to move companies. And that if you're doing remote, apply for a little bit more, but if you want to go into the office, those are free.
Yes. So I had a client who wanted to go in person, and she applied for 9 jobs to get I think she got 2 offers for 9. And then I had my most jobs, and I actually stopped counting, but for one of my clients, we applied for over 1,000 jobs for him to get 2 offers. So that was
a lot of jobs, like 1,000. I mean, but it's just, wow.
It just kind of is what it is. If your industry is really overwhelmed with people, particularly like telehealth, for example, people are fleeing nursing in huge numbers. And so the number of people applying for remote jobs in telehealth from that field is huge. So there's just more people applying than normal. People are fleeing higher ed and K through 12. So anything that touches education is overwhelmed. So anything learning development, training, instructional design, curriculum design, anything like that, all overwhelmed with people who are trying to leave those industries. Anything, because certain industries have contracted a lot, like events, online events and stuff, lots of people applying for those types of jobs. And I think that anybody in marketing that I've worked with, we've had to apply for a large number of jobs for them. So anyone in social media, digital marketing, content marketing, those folks, we have to apply for more jobs than normal.
But that's good to know that some industries you're still going to have to do this application of more, but some are not. But some you're still just going to have to, if there's an influx and wanting to move in that direction, then understand your competition is higher. But it also sounds like in higher ed and in K through 12, that if you decide you want to be a teacher, now almost might be the time, if there's drastically leaving, that if you want to ever get in, because I always was like, I want to be kind of a professor. Maybe I could do that once or twice a week. It works for my schedule if I have kids. That now would be the time to get that experience. So
absolutely,
if you never went back, you still would have this experience because everybody's leaving that has the experience. It's like, well, I can slide in and get some.
Yeah.
So
same with nursing, I would say too. So nursing, K through 12, higher ed, all industries that people are leaving in huge numbers. So that you're absolutely right. If you wanted to get in, now is a great time. I've worked with a couple of folks who were sort of long-term unemployed, and they have gotten into in-person jobs in some of these industries because it's just easier to do. Yeah.
Well, we definitely appreciate you coming in today and giving us some phenomenal tips about pivoting your ideal career, what to look for, how to really gauge this market. She's an executive coach. So guys, definitely, she may be full. I think she said she had a couple of slots. So if you want to catch her, you better catch her while she has these slots, because she fills up very, very quickly. So Kristen, we are at the end. What is your closet confession?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I was debating on what my thing was going to be. So I think the thing that I'm going to say is that most people who do some sort of executive coaching and talk about careers and things like that, they typically come from an HR background, and they typically really like businesses and organizations. But what I would say is that I really don't like them. I really don't like them.
When you say that, I was like, I know where she's going with this. If you follow
Yeah.
her group and the Notable Woman, you already know how she feels about some of this stuff. She likes
Yeah.
people, not
I
necessarily.
love people. I love people so much. I love people. I don't like organizations. I don't like how they take advantage of people. And so the reason that I do this work is because I think,
everybody else does.
yes, it's the exact opposite. Like, other people really like organizations. They want them to do well. They want them to find the best people. And I don't think that at all. I think that you deserve everything you want out of life.
There you
And
go.
that if you had the tools and the tips and the insider information about how to navigate these toxic entities, then you would do better for yourself and better
Yeah.
for your families and live a better life. And so that's why I do this work. So that's sort of my closet confession, is that I don't like companies. I don't like jobs.
You do the work for the people so they can have the life that they want. Like,
Yes.
almost like sticking it to the companies. Like, yep, I'm gonna
Yes.
get them in there and they're gonna make money and you're gonna pay them their worth because I helped them get in. Haha.
Yes. And I know what to tell them what to say so that they can navigate the toxic bosses. And I tell everybody you're going camping on vacation and there's no cell service there. So you can turn that thing right off and you're not answering any emails. You know, I like to help people win. And so that is why I do this work. But I don't like companies. That's my confession. I don't like
That is a funny confession. And it's, if you follow Kristen on anything, you already know she doesn't. She's not.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, talking to us about the Great Resignation, careers, pivoting, and giving some phenomenal tips. If you're looking to change careers, if you're looking to negotiate your salary, Kristen has given a wealth of information for you to start, especially if you're already a professional. She gave a couple of groups she works with: parents returning to the workforce, people that have been out of the workforce due to caring for like a sick loved one, those kinds of where you felt like, I don't know if I really want to stick in this career. I have these skills. Maybe I want to pivot. Those types of people too. So we just thank her so much for coming on and closing out our adult career day for how to get your ideal position, and talked about the salary too. She's like, you need, at this point, you can almost double it if you'd like, ask for that salary because companies are willing to pay because their workforce is, I think she said, almost down 1 million due to COVID and COVID disability. So thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us on the Closet Confessions.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And dealing with the toddler who
he's like, I'm here. Ah! I love it.
You say hello.
It's good to see you.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time. So April, we're taking April, we have some things coming up. April, May, I'm taking the month off, and then we're going into our fun summer. So I already got chefs lined up. Maybe we'll have Kristen back to tell some jokes. I don't know. We'll think of some fun topics. Maybe motherhood. Maybe that's one we should talk about.
That's a good one.
And how to balance it all. And so over the summer, we'll have some really, really fun things to really bring together connection, family bonding, because I feel like over the pandemic, we don't get to do that enough. So I want to kind of give some tips, some tricks, I got 4 or 5 chefs lined up, some meals maybe. If you are in my group, I like to eat. I used to post every Saturday a new place I'd eaten, and Kristen would tell me places to visit in New York, so I'm keeping a list. So food conversations is what I definitely love. So all right, guys, see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.